Hi, this is Ira Gorlick, and this lecture is on moral hazard and self-reliance. Moral hazard is an important economic term, and what it means is that the risk that a party to a transaction has not entered into that contract in good faith, a bad actor, you can see why I keep on bringing up bad actors, has provided misleading information about the commercial transaction. Moral hazard can be present anytime two parties come into agreement with each other. Each party in the contract may have an opportunity to gain from acting contrary to the principles laid out by the agreement, a bad actor. Sometimes systems have perverse incentives, we call a moral hazard. Perhaps it's better to identify and change the perverse incentive rather than vilifying the economic actors. What that's saying is that perhaps every transaction has the potential of having a moral hazard. So rather than sort of label somebody as a bad actor, as I did, we might just want to look at the terms of the agreement to eliminate any kind of moral hazard. And net neutrality regulations may have a significant moral hazard consequences if not carefully crafted, which is why I'm bringing it up here. And may have these moral hazard consequences even if carefully crafted. But we need to understand what the moral hazard is of net neutrality so that if we can craft good regulations or good rules, then we should. If not, then we should recognize it. So, some examples of moral hazard. When a salesperson is paid a flat salary and no commissions for his or her sales, there is a danger that the salesperson may not try very hard to sell the business owner's goods because the wage stays the same regardless of how much or how little the owner benefits from the salesperson's work. All right, so here we have a relationship between a business owner and a salesperson, and the moral hazard would be that given the agreement that the business owner may not get the most out of the salesperson. Of course, you can have the other side of that is when a salesperson is paid to sell a specific product. The salesperson may deceive the buyer into buying what is best for the salesperson and not what is best for the buyer. I've been in sales, and for example, I'd go in the morning and they'd say, okay, today we're selling accessories. So I would go out of my way to sell accessories. Whether the person I'm selling to needed accessories or not is that I would spin the information in order to sell accessories. Moral hazard can be somewhat reduced by placing responsibilities on both parties of a contract. Sort of the buyer beware. In other words, talking about my sales of accessories, this is, by the way, sales of accessories was when I was selling for Verizon, that you sort of take the responsibility off me as a salesperson and say, well, it's the buyer beware. It's their fault. It's not my responsibility. Or moral hazard can be reduced by more information. The more one knows, the more protection one has. So if the buyer knows that I'm trying to sell accessories, or then if the buyer knows that I'm trying to sell accessories, then that could help them make a better, more informed decision. And in terms of net neutrality, this information is called transparency. In other words, the moral hazard is reduced if I know what the seller is trying to sell or what the provider is trying to provide. Moral hazard also describes how behavior changes when people are insured against losses. If, for example, your car is fully insured against any and all damage and there is no deductible, then you would have no incentive to avoid minor accidents like scratches or backing into poles beyond the inconvenience of getting the car fixed. You'd be more likely to take risks that could lead to minor car damage, knowing that any damage is fully covered. And this is a key element to moral hazard, and it's why I bring it up here, is the idea that, sort of everybody needs to have skin in the game kind of thing. Here, the term insurance should be interpreted broadly. Insurance refers to anything that insulates an individual from harm. It isn't necessarily something that must be purchased from an insurance agent. For example, wearing a bike helmet offers some insurance against serious injury and might induce a cyclist to take more risks that could lead to a fall. Or, using a net neutrality example, if there is no penalty for use of the network, people may overuse the network, causing blockage. And remember, I had a whole discussion about traffic shaping. And this is why we have metered usage. If you have unlimited use plans, what's the incentive for you to reduce your usage? And if you're using a shared resource, and this is important, we talk about tragedy of the commons and public goods, is that if there's no incentive for you to manage your usage, and then it's a shared usage, then it could affect other people. So, what are some of the solutions to moral hazard? The most popular solution to the moral hazard problem is to make people pay a share of the cost of the hazardous or risky behavior. In auto insurance markets, this comes in the form of a deductible that forces the car owner to pay for minor damage in full and to pay a relatively large share for more costly damage. Since the car owner must pay for some or all of the damages, he or she is more likely to be a careful driver, less likely to park so close to other cars that the door gets nicked, less likely to take the car in for repairs, and so forth. In telecommunications market, this means people pay for the bits they use. It's called metered usage, as opposed to unlimited usage. Whenever people are protected from downside of their choices, they will tend to take an additional risk, sometimes excessively so. If taking an extra risk has the potential to impose cost on other people, or puts other people at risk in some way, such as in a financial system breakdown, then some mechanism is needed to temper the risk-taking and protect innocent bystanders from the consequence of morally hazardous behavior. And Joanie Hearse, who's a newly elected senator from Iowa, she said this, and I want to read it because I think it's important. What we have to do a better job of is educating not only Iowans, but the American people that they can be self-sufficient. They don't have to rely on the government to be the do-all, end-all of everything they need and desire. And that's what we have fostered. In reality, a generation of people that rely on the government to provide absolutely everything for them. It's going to take a lot of education to get people out of that. It's going to be very painful, and we know that. So do we have the intestinal fortitude to do that? So she's talking about moral hazard. She's talking about in her worldview that the government gives people everything. There's no responsibility on the part of the receiving all those things to do anything. It's the moral hazard. She goes on to say, we rely on government for absolutely everything. And in the years since I was a small girl, up until now, into my adulthood with children of my own, we have lost a reliance on not only our own families, but so much on what our churches and private organizations can do. They used to have wonderful food pantries. They used to provide clothing for those that really needed it. But we have gotten away from that. Now we're at a point where the government will just give away anything. So whether you agree with her or not, and by the way, I don't agree with her, but I think she points out a very important perspective in terms of moral hazard and the effect it has on an economy. Joanie Hearse is saying that the community is creating a moral hazard by giving people stuff. So the question for this class, does her point fit net neutrality? Is the community creating a moral hazard by setting rules of net neutrality at all? All right, so the next lectures I'm going to talk about public utilities and the tragedy of the commons. Thank you.